What if what you've been told is an anger issue or a mood disorder is actually your body's cry for safety in a world that doesn't understand your sensitivity? Right now, I'm recording this episode in the thick of an emotional exhaustion. Between securing work, building this business, and navigating everyday life as a neurodivergent person, my nervous system feels completely overloaded. This isn't just stress, it's soul level overwhelm, and that's why this conversation matters. For autistic people, meltdowns aren't about bad behavior. They're a buildup of unprocessed energy, sensory overload, and emotional invalidation. Today, I'm sharing the spiritual truth behind autistic meltdowns and what most people get completely wrong about them. Keep listening. Welcome to the Inner Magic Academy podcast. If you're loving our videos, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks and enjoy this episode. Welcome, I'm your host Peter Magic, and if you've ever found yourself on the edge of a meltdown or have been judged for overreacting or not coping, you're not alone. As an autistic person with ADHD, I've experienced firsthand how the world misunderstands our nervous systems, our needs, and the ways we process emotion. Right now, I'm feeling this in real time. I'm emotionally full, tired, pushed, and wired. And this episode is my way of turning that pressure into presence so I can meet myself and maybe help you meet yourself too. We're going deep today into the spiritual and emotional roots of autistic meltdowns, not as dysfunction, but as signals from the soul that something is deeply misaligned. The key themes we'll explore today are what actually causes an autistic meltdown, so beyond the surface, how overstimulation, lack of support, and rejection sensitivity builds internal pressure, why workplaces and public environments can be dangerous for our nervous systems, how people confuse meltdowns with mood disorders and why that's incredibly damaging, and the spiritual insight when it comes to meltdowns as a release of trapped energy, truth, and unmet needs. So the key question to today's podcast is, are your emotional meltdowns a sign of dysfunction or a cry from your most authentic self to finally be witnessed? Let's dive in. The first segment we're going to get into is what really triggers an autistic meltdown. So when you look at the human nervous system and when you look at someone who falls under the spectrum of autism, their nervous system is often misunderstood because most people see a meltdown and they think anger, rage, emotional instability, but what they don't actually see is the build-up that led to it. So our nervous system as an autistic person is like a sponge. We're absorbing sensory input, emotional energy, environmental chaos. And when there's no outlet, it implodes. So when you think of an autistic person, when they don't have an outlet to express those emotions and things that they're experiencing, when they're not expressing that, and when they're environments where other people aren't holding space for them, and there's so much that's going on around them from a sensory point of view in that environment, there's so much that's going on, it can be so difficult for them because a lot of the time they're just trying to survive and they're masking and there's no outlet for them to really express how they're truly feeling. And so this starts to build up. And it's like, because they're tuned into a high frequency, that the dial's turned up even more, they're soaking everything up like a sponge. And what you've got to understand is it's like, your body's an energetic container. So think of like you have a cup of water and you're filling that cup up. And at some point, it's going to start overflowing. And this is what it's like. It's like that cup is overflowing. And so the body just needs to release and let it go. Like there's nowhere else to store it. It's soaked everything up. And when autistic people aren't expressing their emotions and how they're feeling, it's like, for example, it's like me in this podcast talking about these topics and expressing how I'm feeling and emotions, all things I'm moving through. it's giving me an outlet to express those emotions, because if I don't express that, the same thing's going to happen to me. It's going to build up. And, there's so much the brain is trying to deal with from a sensory point of view, because like the body is that container, it's soaking everything up. You need that outlet. You need to express those emotions, those feelings that you're experiencing when it comes to, being autistic. It's so, so important. And, look in society and just how suppressed we are in society. And so many autistic people struggle being out in public, environments where there's so many people, whatever's going on around them, it's overwhelming for them, and they struggle to really express themselves more authentically in those environments. And so they're soaking everything up each and every day, and this builds up, and at some point they're going to implode, and it's just going to come out, and it's going to come out through these intense emotions and feelings, because it's got to the point when they can no longer, the body and the nervous system can no longer hold on to it. And so then what they're projecting out is this, it's like it's coming through this autistic meltdown. And this is why in society it's often misunderstood, and people only understand things at a surface level as to what they're seeing in front of their eyes. They don't know that build up that actually led to that meltdown. And it's so important that we really start to understand what it's really like for someone who falls under the spectrum. Because, when in society, when we start to take the time to hold space for people who are autistic, we give them an outlet to express their energy. And when we don't take the time to better know and understand someone who's autistic, when we don't hold the space for them, then this is what can happen, is they really struggle to express how they're truly feeling and express themselves more authentically. And, when they're not doing this, at some point, the cup's gonna start to overflow. And it's important that, autistic people feel more seen, feel more heard, feel more understood, feel more safe in those environments they're in, to start really expressing how they're truly feeling, and other people taking that time to know and understand them better, and holding space for them, because that's truly what they need. And this is what we need to change in society. We really need to start to look at really what's happening in our nervous systems when it comes to this, and stop labeling these things as, bipolar disorder, mood disorders, anger issues, anger management issues, whatever's going on. Like, there's so much more that's going on from a sensory point of view, and so we need to start to acknowledge that. So to summarize what I was just saying, meltdowns are a form of energetic detox. So they can happen when your body, your soul, and your nervous system can no longer carry the weight of everything you've been suppressing just to survive in a world that wasn't built for you. I'll share a recent experience with you in a recent job that I was working at, and I was basically put into this role with absolutely no guidance, no training, no structure, but I was still expected to perform perfectly in this role. And think of just anyone being put in this role, but someone who's actually autistic, not being given the tools to succeed, not being given the support, and being put in an environment where, people are really not expressing how they're truly feeling. You notice there's so much going on and so much stress. You can see the stress in the room. People are so stressed in their own roles, and you're here. You can't even ask for help, because if you do ask for help for somebody that's, in the same company, they've got their own work, their own things to deal with, and they don't even know your role. It just feels like you're being put into the ocean with no life raft, with no tools, no support, no nothing, and you're expected to perform. And think of what that's going to do to someone who's autistic, and what that's going to do to their ADHD brain. It's going to start to spiral. And And for example, for myself, I tried my best to do the role to the best of my ability, try to figure it out on my own. And there were times when I had no idea what to do next, and I would reach out, and there'd be no support. It would take a long time for them to respond, get back to me, and I didn't have what I needed to do the role properly, and I felt that I was destined to fail in the role from the start. And each and every day, I got to the point where all of this would build up. All these emotions would build up, or wasn't able to express myself. And there was one day where I was overflowing. I could no longer hold on to that, and I expressed and I let that out. And, I felt ashamed for doing that in this environment around, other people. I felt ashamed for this, but I could not hold on to it any longer. And this is what it's like for an autistic person. And I had to apologize to absolutely everyone around in the office space and explain myself. And, some may have understood, but a lot of people still misunderstand when it comes to falling under the spectrum of autism. They still misunderstand what's really going on in their nervous systems. And it doesn't mean that, I can't control my own emotions. That it doesn't mean that there's anything that I'm doing wrong. It's just I'm overflowing, and my nervous system's maxed out. My container, my body's maxed out. And so I need an outlet, and I need to express myself. And when I'm not given the space to do that, what do you expect? What do you expect me to do in those moments? I can't hold on to it, and it's just going to come out through those intense emotions and feelings that everybody around me is going to, be overwhelmed by. And this is what it's like for an autistic person. This is what it's like. There's so much going on, and we're in this society where people are holding themselves back. And I'm talking about someone who's autistic and who's tuned into that high level of frequency, and their outer environment's even more difficult for them to deal with. And they're told in society to control their emotions, to not express how they're feeling. And this is why autistic people struggle the most. This is why their nervous system's in this state of dysregulation all the time, because they do feel like they are too much for other people, and they do feel ashamed and guilty when they do have these meltdowns. And it's because it's misunderstood in society. And so we need to really start to understand that there's only so much that our bodies and our nervous systems can hold on to. And so we need to express ourselves more authentically. We need an outlet. We, as autistic people, we need the tools and support and other people to hold space for us, to create that environment for us to actually, so we can start to really express ourselves more authentically and openly. And the problem is we've got a long way to get to that. It doesn't matter what work environment you're in. As an autistic person, you do really struggle in these environments. And I feel like it's important for us who are experiencing the world in this way to really start to normalize what it's really like and what's really going on underneath the surface. And I hope this podcast is a way for those people to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. Before we move on to the next segment, I'll get you to reflect on this one question. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed at work, not because you couldn't do the job, but because you were set up to fail? The second segment we're going to get into is overstimulation, rejection sensitivity, and emotional explosions. So when you look at it from a sensory point of view, just how much, of an overload this can have in everyday life for someone who falls under the spectrum, because they're tuned into that high level of frequency. And so that means everything in their outer environment is affecting them even more, right? All their senses is picking everything up, and their nervous system is having to deal with so much. And so their brain is having to process through all of that as well. So whether this is through public spaces, public transport, work environments, fluorescent lights, loud conversations, small talk, constant unpredictability, these aren't small stresses. They're traumatic for a sensitive nervous system. So it goes from overstimulation, right? So being overstimulated by everything going on, to meltdown. And this can sometimes look like yelling, sometimes it's crying, sometimes it's silence, but it's never a flaw. It's a release, it's a signal, it's a survival response. And this is why a lot of autistic people have these trauma responses, because these survival responses are there for a reason. Because when you're overwhelmed by everything, your nervous system's either going to shut down, you're going to completely shut down, or it's going to go into fight and flight. And this is what happens. This is what it's there for. It's doing its job to try and protect you. And when you're someone who falls under the spectrum, there's so much going on, and your nervous system is constantly affected by that. And at some point, when that cup's overflowing, it can no longer hold on to it any longer, and it's either going to overflow and you're going to project from that place of those really intense emotions and feelings. It's all going to come out through that meltdown, or nervous system's going to completely shut down. You're going to completely shut down. And people mistake it for bipolar disorder, anger management issues, emotional immaturity, or unprofessionalism. And each mislabel adds another layer of shame. So because instead of asking what support do you need, we're asking what's wrong with you. We're looking at someone who's autistic, right? And whether someone is aware that they fall under the spectrum or not. There's so many people in the world that are actually autistic and not even aware that they are, and they think there's something wrong with them. And they're mislabeled with all these different labels. They go to a GP, and whatever process they go through, they label them with all of these things. And they think there's something wrong with them. They think they need to take medication. They think they need to suppress themselves because of how they're experiencing the world. We've got it completely wrong in society. And so this is why it's so important to really start to explain this from more of a more underneath the surface, from a spiritual lens. There's so much more going on that society is still learning and starting to become more aware of. So when we look at this from a spiritual lens, the meltdown is not the problem. The problem is the environment, the pressure, and the misunderstanding. So your soul came here with deep sensitivity for a reason. Meltdowns are your spirit's rebellion against the lie that you're too much. Right? Just look at how desensitized we are in society. We're so desensitized, and we're being squeezed and suppressed, and so many of us really struggle to be in touch with our emotions and struggle with a dysregulated nervous system because we're not expressing that energy, and we're not being taught how to express these in more healthy ways as well. Because when it comes to the point of not only are we carrying these stresses through family lineage, right? We already carry this when we're born into this world, but then because it's like you're a sensitive soul that's been put onto the planet, you're already tuned into that high frequency, then you're also having to deal with all the things that are going on around you, and your brain is already, it's already mapped to what is happening in your DNA and your cells. It's responding to your nervous system and how it's wired, and it's already wired in that way. And so you're just, as a human being, you're just you're being in how you're being told to be in the world. And in society, a lot of us wear masks and we struggle to fully express ourselves, and we think there's something wrong with us in the way we're experiencing the world through our senses. And a lot of what's happening underneath the surface, we aren't even aware of within ourselves, because we're so much in our own heads. And these patterns and these cycles continue to play out, but they're playing out and they're spiraling like this because that's where our awareness is. Our awareness isn't inside the body where it needs to be. It needs to be underneath the surface, and we need to be present with these feelings and emotions so we can start to move our energy. We can start to be in the flow. We can start to express how we're truly feeling. And, like anything, this becomes a habit. Once we start to become more expressive and truly, express ourselves more authentically and openly, we start to release these things. We start to release the traumas, the stresses, the things we've been holding on to. And so we're not going to overflow and all the time, because we're having an outlet. We're letting this out. We are supporting our nervous system in the ways that it needs to be supported, because we understand that we are wired in this way, and so we need to express ourselves in those healthier ways and break those patterns and those cycles that are not healthy for us, right? These things are keeping us in this state of dysregulation and keeping us reliant on something outside of us, and keeping us disconnected from our own bodies and keeping us really misaligned from the inside out to our own soul. And so there are parts and aspects of ourselves that are projecting from an unconscious place, right? They've lost touch with our true frequency, where our energy is actually coming from. They've lost touch with that. And so that's why we lack consciousness around these things. And so we need to really start to go underneath the surface and be present with that, because the more we do that, the more we reconnect these parts and aspects of ourselves that think there's something wrong with them in the way they're experiencing life, and all the stories and all the attachments and all the things that they're holding on to, that they've suppressed, that they've made a part of their identity, things that you are not aware of. The more you express that outwardly, the more you start to see things become more visible for you, and that's how you start to know yourself better. That's how you start to really understand there's nothing wrong in the way that I'm wired. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just society's got this completely wrong. And so, this is the pathway we're on now as humanity as a whole. We're on this pathway of understanding just how misaligned we are from the inside out, and just how disconnected we've become and desensitized we've become. And I feel it's so important that people really start to know the truth. And this is what I'm here for in this lifetime. This is why my soul put me here in this experience, to go through what I've been through, because, I'm getting to the point now where I'm really starting to notice and see things that, I thought that things that were wrong with me in the way I was experiencing the world. No, it's just because I didn't know myself, and all of these things were suppressed, and all of the things I was holding on to. And my nervous system was constantly spiraling out of control, and it's not my fault. It's a generational thing, and there's nothing wrong with me in the way I'm experiencing the world, and that I fall under the spectrum. It just allows me to know myself better, and I really feel like this is really, really important to really start to talk about these things more. Before we move on to the next segment, I'll get you to reflect on this one question. What environments constantly leave you feeling on edge or overstimulated? And what would change if people saw your reaction as a cry for safety, not a flaw? The third segment we're going to get into is the energetic truth and how to honor your sensitivity. So when it comes to meltdowns as energy releasing, when you've been masking, when you've been smiling while drowning, when you've held in your truth just to cope, the meltdown is the breakthrough. It's your soul saying, enough pretending. I need space, I need rest, I need safety. And when you're in this human experience, you are a human being and you need an outlet to express yourself. And there's only so much that your container, your body, your nervous system, there's only so much that the cup can hold. And at some point it's going to overflow. And this is a natural response. This is a natural response. And it's important that you release this energy. And when you see someone having an autistic meltdown, expressing those intense emotions and feelings, it's important to really start to notice that, this isn't happening because they're lacking control or there's anything wrong with them in the way they're experiencing the world. It's as society as a whole, we misunderstand, right? We basically put everyone into one box, one category, and we expect everyone is going to respond in the exact same way. No, we don't. We're wired differently, where some of us are tuned into a higher level of frequency. Some of us experience the outer world completely different to what is perceived on the outside. And so we need to really start to look at this from a high level of consciousness, not just from a human point of view, because there's so much going on underneath the surface that we're still learning, we're still unraveling, we're still starting to only see a little bit underneath the surface. There's so much that we really need to learn as society as a whole, and this is so important to really see things from a spiritual lens. And this is why I'm sharing this podcast, because this is allowing me, it's giving me an outlet to express from my point of view and how I'm experiencing it, and I'm just being that voice to others. I'm giving them a voice. I'm making them feel seen, feel heard, feel understood. And that's why I show up. And this is why I continue to do this, because these topics are so important to discuss. So when it comes to my own experience, how I've learned to prevent meltdowns. So the experience that I expressed recently that I had in this work environment, it was, I was set to fail from the start. And that experience in itself is I was just in the wrong environment. I was in the wrong role. I wasn't set up to succeed, especially, someone who's autistic. But what I've learned when it comes to, stopping a lot of these meltdowns from happening is I learned to, protect my energy by limiting overstimulating environments. So I understand there's only so much that I can take, and I need to, I need my own space. I need to recharge my batteries, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, I give myself permission to unmask. I know that it's important. Doing this podcast, for example, I allow myself to express that energy and what I'm moving through and what I'm feeling. And, this outlet's so important for me. And I'm also learning to do this more out in public and around, friends and family. And I'm learning to step more out of my comfort zone and express how I'm truly feeling. And I know that is going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people, but I need to express that. And for some people that might look like me being so intense, but this is important, that I'm being myself, and there's nothing wrong in the way I'm expressing my energy, the way I'm expressing myself. And I learned to ground myself through doing breath work. I noticed when my nervous system's rolled up, I learned to just take a moment and just breathe and just focus on my own breath, having time to myself, movement, going to the gym, doing weight training, going for a walk. All these things really help me each and every day. And if I'm not doing these things, I get stagnant. Those emotions get hold on to them, and I really need to get in the flow and really get my body in the flow. And it's so important. I remind myself I don't need to earn safety, rest, or peace. There's nothing that I need to do to earn that. I already am worthy of that. I have to give that to myself. I've got to do whatever I need to do. And each and every day, it's a new day, and I've got to take it one day at a time. And it's important that I really start to listen to my body and my nervous system, because it's moving through and it's processing so much each and every day, and each and every day is different. And so I need to learn to listen to my body and my nervous system, in every moment. When it comes to feeling misunderstood, it's painful to be seen as the meltdown instead of the person underneath it. But the more you honor your truth, the more your nervous system begins to feel safe, regardless of who gets it. So it doesn't matter that other people don't understand you, that other people only see what's playing out at a surface level. It's more important for you to know and understand in your own self, in your own nervous system, learning to see that not as a flaw, learning to see that, you are wired differently and you're experiencing so much more. There's so much more going on from the inside out. And so when you start to turn inwardly, when you start to know yourself better, and when you start to, create more of a safety and security from the inside out, the more you realign yourself, and the more, your nervous system's going to be in this regulated state, and the more you're not going to feel overwhelmed, and you're not going to care how other people perceive that. You're not going to care that, because, people are going to continue to judge, people are going to continue to misunderstand, because they're not in your experience, and they don't know how you're experiencing that. So it's important for you to really just know yourself better, and this is part of it. Before we move on, I'll get you to reflect on this one question. What would it look like to honor your sensitivity before the meltdown happens? What if every moment of overwhelm was sacred communication from your soul? We're coming to the end of today's episode, and I have a final reflection for you. Meltdowns aren't about brokenness. They're the sacred breaking of illusion. The illusion that you have to hold it all together. The illusion that you need to perform to be safe. The illusion that sensitivity makes you weak. You're not too much. You're not failing. You're carrying energy that was never meant to be yours. And your body is asking you to let it go. The key takeaways from today's episode are: meltdowns are not mood disorders. They are unmet needs bursting through. Rejection sensitivity distorts your self-worth in environments that don't support you. Sensitivity is a gift, not a burden. And the spiritual path of the autistic soul is about releasing pressure and reclaiming safety. So what I'll get you to do today is I want you to reflect on these questions here. Where in your life are you tolerating environments that dysregulate you? Where do you need more support, more softness, more structure? And what would it feel like to give yourself permission to rest before the breakdown? Thanks for being here with me on the Inner Magic Academy podcast. Remember, you are not broken, you are not unstable, you are not your meltdown. You are a deeply sensitive soul living in a noisy world, and your magic is in the truth you carry. Until next time, honor your nervous system, reclaim your truth, and don't let anyone shame your sensitivity. I love you. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode. If you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to our channel and give us a like or even a comment. It really does help so much in getting our work out there to the people who need it. We're so grateful for you being here, and we'll see you for the next episode.